I can hear you. You can see me. I can hear you. Whatever.
Okay, cool.
All right, 1, 2, 3.
Go ahead, start your countdown.
Hello, everyone. I'm Cynthia Hawkins, Gallery Director and Curator at the Bertha V.B. Lederer Gallery. I thank you for joining us at this, our final exhibition for 2021 season. And we have with us Lawrence Philp from Georgia. So I should tell you that the Lederer Gallery is located on the campus of the State University of New York in Geneseo. For the sake of transparency, I have known Lawrence Philp for many years ago. And recently in 2019, that's recent, right? Two years ago, he had a solo exhibit at the Lockhart Gallery on Main Street in Geneseo, which is part of college programming. As in recent interviews, the PowerPoint will loop in the background. So our guest this time, Lawrence's practice includes painting, collage, and printmaking. He's lived in various cities, taught at SUNY Oswego, Hartwick College. He's been an artist in residence at Gallery 53 in Cooperstown, the Vermont Studio Center, and Anderson Ranch Art Center, and has won a number of awards. Welcome, Lawrence.
Welcome, Cynthia. I never taught at SUNY Oswego.
What?
I never taught at SUNY Oswego. I taught at Hartwick College in Oneonta, New York.
Great. Oh, I thought I saw that on your resume.
Oswego? No.
Yeah. No?
Can't be on there. I never did it.
Oh, all right. You're the boss.
No.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. No, it's easy.
So, welcome again, minus my error. Why don't you tell us about your background then, since, you know, I have misread some things, and tell us about your background and what compelled you to become an artist.
My background, I was born in Harlem and raised in Brooklyn, New York. My parents are from, my mom was born in the United States and raised in Jamaica. My father was born and raised in Jamaica, West Indies, and immigrated here, I think, in 1925. I started out just drawing on walls and copying cartoon books and things of that nature when I was small. I had a real interest in making stuff. I used to make hand puppets and marionettes, or at least I tried to anyway. I didn't know how to make these things. I would see them and say, and see if I could try and make them, kind of deal. So that's how I started. And I continue to do that, continue to have a curiosity about drawing. But I never really consistently thought about it till I was in high school. I went to Thomas Jefferson High School and they had a major art program there. And I started gravitating towards that rather than just playing basketball and hanging out and being a high school kid. I started looking for colleges to go to, and I applied to the Rhode Island School of Design, the Art Institute of Chicago, and Cranbrook Institute in Cranbrook, Michigan. I was accepted to the Rhode Island School of Design. So in 1967, my parents packed me up and took me to school. And from 1967 to 1971, I stayed I participated in the degree program in painting, and I got a BFA in 1971. Went from there to the University of Michigan, where I was a teaching fellow. Uh, I was in the University of Michigan and graduated in 1973. And then I was out on, I was out of school. So I had to find work. And excuse me, first I wasn't really lucky about work. And then as a couple of years went by, moved from Ann Arbor to Detroit. And I was married at that period of time. Also bought a house and did that whole trip and worked for the Detroit Public Library, drove a bookmobile. So from there, found a teaching job in Mount Pleasant, Michigan. And that was at Central Michigan University in Mount Pleasant. And I taught there from 1975 to 1978. I taught painting, drawing, figure drawing, color theory, and some printmaking courses there as well. I also worked with the graduate students at Central Michigan University for 4 semesters. So I left CMU, I left Mount Pleasant in 1978, went back to New York and took my stuff, put it in my parents' garage, and just sort of tripped around New York for a while, trying to get my legs back and see what either I'd missed or what I was going to do next. So didn't have much success, so I just started working odd jobs. And finally ended up working for Gourmet Books in the Warehouse for about 5 years on East 30, was it East 35th Street in Brooklyn, right under the BQE, where the more expensive loft spaces are now, of course. But I worked there for 5 years, 6 years. Had studio space in the Williamsburg section of Brooklyn, and just sort of interacted with the arts community and spent a lot of time in my studio, painting on my paintings and stuff like that. 1989, I left New York City and went to Oneonta, New York to teach at Hartwick for 2 years, which I did. And then I spent the next 7 years in Oneonta just working in a studio. My father passed away, and 88, 89, no, 98, I went down to Florida to live with my mom. And I stayed there with her until she decided she wanted to move to Georgia to be closer to her sister's daughter and their children. So they moved here in 2015. She passed away in 2016. And that's how I'm here right now. Basically, I have a place to live in. I'm still functioning and working in the painting in the garage right now. The garage is not a white cube space, and I don't care about that. I'm getting some work done. So that's all there is that matters to that right now. I paint in 2 rooms paint and draw in 2 rooms in the house, and I also work in the garage because I don't want to, can't cut wood in the living room, at least not yet. So that's
a lot of artists have converted garages to studios. So you can see that all over. I mean, like, I was just looking yesterday, and sheds turned into studios, garages. I mean, it's like, what do? You know, where depends on your circumstances and what kind of space is around you. So that's that's normal.
There's just to give you an idea of what things cost around here. There's a place called the Goat Farm, which is supposed to be like an alternative art space. and they sent me a flyer, as they do every couple of months, about studio space, and they want like $3,500 a month for
What?
studio space. Yeah, that's what I said. I said, huh?
No, that's,
Gotta be kidding.
no.
No,
No,
that's what
that's a house, $3,000. That's like, forget it.
well, some of these places, the spaces are really large, but
I don't
they're,
care.
they're as large as the space that you'll find in New York City, but it's even more expensive than that, is what I'm saying. I
Yeah,
mean,
$3,000. Those
that's
are not actual real artists.
no,
Those are people who play.
that's true.
Yeah.
That's true. It's like it's really funny. There are a lot of people who play
I
at it.
mean, it's not that you have to be broke, but that's like, if you're spending 3,000 on the space, what are you spending on your materials? I mean, like the average artist we're talking about here. So
Well,
anyway,
that $3,000 is paint money.
yeah, right?
Yeah, for real. Paint money, cardboard money,
Yeah,
printing money, the whole 9 yards. You name
for goodness sakes. Well, all right. So,
it.
oh my gosh. So, um, so I am really intrigued with your Collagraphs, this exhibition of the black and white prints that you did. First, let me say to people, as this PowerPoint is rolling, there are like 3 very colorful images towards the end. Okay, those are there for a latter part of our talk, but the exhibition is called Variant, and there are 12 collagraphs. And I think I'd love it if Lawrence could tell us what a collagraph is, and and how one goes about it, the process. And yeah, I'd like to know that, because there are many printmaking processes, and I know like 2 or 3. So please elucidate us.
Luther,
Enlighten us.
I'm about to do that. About 2017 or 2018, I took a relief printmaking course at the Atlanta printmaking studio, which is downtown, closer to Fulton County, and I made some collagraphs there, but I wasn't really pleased with what I did, or how I made them, or what the process actually taught me, because I hadn't fooled around with it enough for myself, which is how I get into these things to begin with anyway. I just really curious about X, Y, and Z, and I read up on stuff, and I find stuff. Anyway, to make a long story short, a collagraph is a collage plate made out of various textures and various materials, which are textural, and they're put together. I use cereal cardboards to make my collographic plates with. I also use Elmer's glue and staples and anything else that'll help adhere a shape to a surface. I Instead of fooling around with the Liquitex stuff, which is supposed to be people friendly, you can still go about making these printing plates with shellac. Shellac helps the printing plates last longer, in my opinion. And so far throughout my usage, I haven't lost a plate like that. I've lost a couple of plates just using the Liquitex varnish. So that's that. Anyway, you make these things and you try to make them so that they're just type high. Type high means that they're about 1/8 of an inch off of the surface, and not any taller than that. So if you look at the letting space on a piece of type, you know exactly what I'm talking about, and the kind of range that you have. raise and lower the surface of these things. So you do that. If you're interested more in lifting, if you're interested more in working on just a flat mat board or cardboard, you can incise the cardboard. You can cut into it and make stuff without having to make any real relief shapes and so on and so forth. And that will print also. So you have the option of making print plates with collage materials and cutting into incising surfaces to finally cover ink and run through the press. The ink that I've been using is a water-based ink, and I like it because I work in the living room and it doesn't, I don't have to put oil of clove or anything in there, and I don't have to live with the oil-based ink, for the present. So that's working out pretty good. I have a press, and I've been fooling around with press pressure and stuff like that. But the press that I use to print these things is it's a speedball press, number 1149, I think it is. And it's more of what they call a mango, which is an old attachment to the older washing machines from the 1930s and 40s, or the ringer tops on these washing machines. So that's what this press is. And it's taken a little bit of time fooling around with it to finally find out that I could actually print with it. So that's what I've been doing. The print, let's see. The Collagraph process itself, you should use a printmaking paper like Reeves BFK, or not so expensive equivalent like Somerset. Or the paper that I've been using is Speedball Arnheim paper, which is really pretty good. And I say that because I've soaked it for a week and then printed with it, and it only broke through the surface on one print, basically. So that paper is pretty strong and it lasts pretty long. Generally, what you want to do is soak the paper for like 20, 25 minutes, blot it, and then run it through the press on top of an ink plate. So that's what I find myself doing. But like I said, I'm sort of nosy and curious, and I like to see what the end product of some of these quote unquote scientific experiments I did, like leaving the paper for a long time in the water. So it doesn't hurt it at all. And the beauty of using the water-based print making stuff right now is that you can, if you have an emergency, you can leave it, come back and it'll still be workable. It won't start to dry out or air out on you. And the Akua inks are especially good at doing that, in that they'll last for a long period of time. They'll stay open for a long period of time, but they won't, once you print or use them or run them through the press, they'll just dry automatically. It's really wild. It's a wild thing to actually experience, especially if you're used to using oil-based printing. Just a remarkable difference.
Yeah, I think a lot of printmakers use Akua inks. So for in these collagraphs here, I mean, it seems to me they're really interesting in the way that not only you have the first image, but then the kind of transformation of the original image occurs when you do a ghost print, which is printing from the print, right? That you just did, right?
Right. Instead of going back to the ink slab and inking the plate a second time, you just run another print through on top of the plate that you just took a print from.
Right.
So it's a process of picking up the leftover ink on the plate.
And so And sometimes it varies a great deal, so much so that you can, that it is a separate, you know, a separate print. So,
Oh yeah, well, the idea is that usually the plate is usually over inked
mhm,
in order to get a print in the first place. I found that if I try to rub the ink down into the surfaces, it doesn't work. So I'm left with using a soft roller and making sure that all the areas are covered. But even with that, you can't have 100% coverage. So once I run the first plate, I'll just run the second image just to see what it looks like. And I'm always, like you said, there's variables, especially in light and dark, and I'm always surprised at what I get because it's like it just really surprises me, and I'm really great. It's really great to see them. I really love seeing the ghost prints a lot. I do. They're my favorites. I must admit.
so let me, so there's, unlike etching, say, you know, or even aquatint, say, something, a plate where you, that it is, has a specific drawing on with lines, you know, you put the ink on and you wipe it off, and there's always this continuity in the image, right? So in Collagraph, I guess there could be, but generally there isn't strict continuity from printing to printing with a particular plate.
I think that that's true, and that's only because of the you can't. It's almost impossible to ink the plate the same way 20 times and have the same quality kind of print come out in an edition. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So
Yeah.
all of these because of the hills and valleys on the plate inked in a certain way are all going to print differently over a period of time. So rather than having an addition of prints, you have a chronology of how that particular plate printed, and that's what I've been interested in, looking at the chronology of how the paint, how the print went through the press and came out 20 times or 15 times or whatever.
Yeah. So
But
that's really interesting. In some ways, it's almost like a monoprint.
well, they're all one off. Yeah, they're like all one of one instead of one of two, one of three, one of
Right.
five.
Right.
Right. You can addition them too, but any discerning printmaking collector is going to say these are not all the same. They don't all look the same, and they'd be absolutely right. So,
Yeah. Yeah. But there's something to that. There, you know, I think that kind of precision in printmaking, you know, one, that's for one area of it, you know, one field of it. And I think in recent years, I mean, especially since the 80s, say, this idea of editioning is not as, you know,
it's not as prevalent. You
it's
say.
not as prevalent. People want to have this, artists want to have this sense of experimentation occur in the work as they do it. So
Well,
yeah,
yeah, you can do the same thing with an intaglio plate, but it's just a long drawn out procedure. And why go through all those changes when you have all this wonderful textured material around? I mean, you can't aquatint a plate so that it comes like some of the stuff that I've done. You just can't do it. It doesn't have the same kind of variation, and even as try as you might not get the kind of steps that you want.
right.
And looking at the ghost prints, I mean, those are like awesome because you can't predict that. I mean,
You're
when
right.
I was yeah, when I was making intaglio plates, um, it was the ink, or not the ink, but the acid is what counted. And the acid biting into the plate and the way you aquatinted it is what counted. With this, it's more like how many surfaces can you put together and sort of weave together to make a plate. So it's much different. It's much different. And I like the difference as well. I like working with the acid and the ink as well, but it's time consuming, and you really do need a good printing press in order to run prints, to do etchings like that. So this is perfect for me right now. It really is. And I didn't think it was from it. Initially, I just like, I don't want to do that. And then I did it a couple of times. And I said, okay, yeah, I want to do that. So, so I've been doing it like that. So that's how I've been working.
So you're saying then that this you're before actually embarking on these collagraphs, you were actually resisting doing it. And so
well, I resisted the idea of there being another way to do it. And after I took the course, it was like, well, okay, I didn't have to bevel the plates in order to run them through the thing. And although I made mistakes with the quantity of material that I put on top of the plates to run, I realized that enough variable textures would make another kind of image and would print. So that was better than trying to make those things using the acid and the aquatint and the stop outs. Would take for years. Well, there is a portion of relief printmaking that's called viscosity, which involves different thicknesses of the ink that's rolled on during a period of time in the process. So that's a whole nother story. This kind of making collagraphs can be like that, but it's not, because the ink doesn't have that far to travel. With the viscosity stuff, you can almost print it. You can bite down to the bottom of the plate, and the plate without breaking would still print. And there'd be a density of color or black and white that you really would be fascinated by seeing. Krishna Reddy, who was a supporter of the printmaking workshop in New York, he used to give classes on that, and his students would come through the studio spaces and make the plates every once in a while. So I being nosy, I always looked to see what they were doing. That's all. That's how I learned a lot of this stuff, through the workshop, through my printmaking course classes at RISD and stuff like that, and my own curiosity, and how it carried over into my adult life.
So that printmaking workshop, you're talking about Bob Blackburn's printmaking workshop, is that right?
Yeah, it would be Bob Blackburn's printmaking workshop on West 17th Street, I think it was.
Yeah.
In New York City. Everybody printed there. Rauschenberg printed there. Jasper Johns at one point. Erwin Hollander. All those people sort of hung out through there, and they knew Bob. They knew of Bob, and they even helped support Bob over a period of time too. There was a fellow by the name of Barnett. I don't remember his first name, but
yeah, Will Barnett.
Will Barnett, yeah, he did paintings of cats and stuff like that, but he also helped to support the workshop.
Yeah, well, they started it together, I think.
At some point, yeah, but then Will dropped out.
Yeah, but they started together when in the 60s, I think, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So yeah, and he was, they were really close. So
we're friends.
And I mean, and there are other people. Jane Quixie Smith were, printed there, and people all over the world came, from Greece, from Scotland, from Cuba, Mexico. People came from all over to print at Bob's place.
I remember one Saturday I was going to go work over there, and I had I was using the etching presses on the floor, and Grace Hartigan one of the press was in the room with her printers, and they were making some prints back there. So Bob came and got us and said, "We want you to see this. So come on." He said, "Get on over here." Like he did. And sure enough, I stood there and watched this thing for like close to an hour, for her running some of her prints on the etching presses in those rooms that they had, which was special because the better presses were in there, and they were all set up for auditioning. It was great. I mean, he was a staunch supporter of people who wanted to work, and it was like, for me, it was amazing to see that, because I hadn't been around that kind of atmosphere since I was in school, and it just made a really big difference to me in terms of my thinking about my pursuits and furthering my artistic pursuits as well. So I always thank him. I thank him like all the time. I say, "Thank you, Bob." I just say it because it's like,
Thank you, Bob. Yeah. He
yeah.
also was really interested in people wanting to experiment, do all kinds of experimental things.
Yeah.
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 So,
He was the guy that taught Rauschenberg how to burn his litho plates.
oh yeah.
Gasoline, dangerous but nice stuff.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So I'd like to let us talk a few minutes about the images and these collagraphs and their collage nature, their structure, and how it relates to your work in general. So let's just go ahead. So these are the next, this one and the one following collage is are recent from your series 16 times 8 equals 1, which, how long have you been working on that series?
Since 2016, actually.
Really?
I started showing them 2 years ago on Facebook, I think, or maybe 2 years ago on Facebook, when they finally got to the point that I thought I could actually bear seeing them and having other people see them.
Then, I caught you just in time, for 2018 for your exhibition at the Lockhart Gallery. However, I have to say that these newer ones seem to have, they've evolved in a way that the structure of the collage itself seems to be more firmer, and that may be from piece to piece, but this seems to have, some of these seem to have a lot more depth and clarity of purpose, if you know what I mean. So is that the case, or am I getting it wrong?
Well, okay, at first I relied on just the drawing with crayons and crayon and the ink, acrylic ink, to make the surfaces. And then after about a year of doing that, I got tired of doing that. So what I started to do is I just started to make backgrounds, and I would start to drop shapes or cut up things that I had done in the interim and start to place them on the 8.5 by 11 surfaces. So that worked for a while too. And then I found that, well, over a period of time, I like to cut up pieces of cardboard. I sort of do it like an exercise. Then I paint the cardboard, and some of the painted cardboard stuff ends up in the drawings and some of the images that I make. So there's always this consciousness of layering and adding something else or covering something up to make it look to make it look different. And I don't know if if what I'm saying is true, but I have to vary the surfaces of my paintings on paper because they would otherwise look too decorative
Mm-hmm.
or too cutesy two-dimensional stuff. So what I'm doing is I'm altering the best stuff that I do and taking it one or two or three steps further. And that's what that's all about right now. So I'm making stuff that I consider complete, but I'll go back in and work into it again, recollage it, repaint it, etc., until I get what I think is something that I'd like to see. There are a couple that work out really nicely, like the one we're looking at right now.
Yeah.
And I can't do that in a sketchbook. I couldn't do that in a drawing, but it just came that way because I was allowed to take something, paste something on top of it, paste something on top of that, and paint it or rework it or resurface it. So yeah, that's what I'm talking about. It's the same process with the collage, but you have to with the collagraphs rather. But you have to remember that you can only go up a certain height. After that, you're asking for trouble.
Mm.
And the ink does squash because I've got a couple of prints that I kept from the printmaking workshop in Atlanta to remind me that that's exactly what happens. It just completely explodes, man. It's ridiculous.
So yeah, and this one in particular, you see, I mean, there must be some glue or something on the surface, or is that the way the paint or ink interacts with the surface? In the big central brown shape there, it's like it sticks and it doesn't adhere and it doesn't adhere, you know, the paint to the surface.
Well, that's true, but that's those are burnt sienna and burnt umber over silver poster paint. So what you've got is once you do that and you sort of blot it, that's the kind of surface that you get.
Interesting. Yeah. I really like this, the way that even on the left side, that sort of yellow gold horizontal marks, and the way the paint adheres at different rates on that area, and on the right. In the
Good thing. Yeah, that's just water-based paint being left to dry and doing what it'll do. You know, if you don't blot it and just leave it on the surface, it's going to congeal a certain way.
Yeah.
If you blot it, let it dry down, it's going to congeal another way. So if I don't like
it's unpredictable, right? It is.
Yeah, it's not that predictable, right? Exactly. You just sort of gotta you do it, say, okay. You have to know when to stop yourself.
Yeah. That's the case in a lot of instances, right?
You just have to say, okay, that's it. Enough. That's done. Next.
So the next image here is Mimbray's bowl, which is acrylic on paper, and from
It's from
like 20 years ago, you know.
Right.
And what I'd like to point out here is the depth of similarity between the Collagraphs and your 16 by 8 pieces that you've been working on for 3 years or 4 years, and this painting of 20 years ago. I mean, it's quite extraordinary, don't you think, to like maintain such a engagement with this notion of collage in its various forms. Of course, they're all really different.
Well, the idea of collages gives you another surface to work with. I mean, we're always looking at things that are, how can I put this? Sometimes take a screen and look through a screen at your work. Sometimes take a big piece of paper, a big, large shape, and just block out everything you've done thus far to start a new painting. With the membran's bows, I was interested in different forms of paint application, just using acrylic paint, because I had gotten to the point where I just got sick and tired of painting flat, 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 flat. So some of that painting has a lot of splashing in it. It's got some built up molding paste areas and things like that. But it's also highly populated by different shapes, which are next to each other, kitty corner to each other, and sort of jostling for attention inside the space of the painting. So that's the kind of stuff I've been doing. That's like New York during rush hour, being on the J train, trying to get to work at 8 o'clock in the morning with 8,000 other people, kind of deal. Or it's just the idea that there's so many different kinds of surfaces and movements that you can use, that or things that you can do on top of things that you've already done to make them stand out more, or to make them come more to the surface. The idea of painting for me is to make something and maybe then cover it up to make something else. Romar Bearden talked a lot about that too. For him, collage was putting something over something else. And maybe that sort of thing sticks in my head too a little bit, but I like the idea of painting and blotting, and then sometimes the blotting ends up in the piece as well, because of the intricacies of the or just the way the paint lays on the other piece of paper. So there's always that. Well,
So, all right, this is like, I don't know if artists like to be asked this last question, like, so, because it's sort of ambiguous in a way. So what in the end, what are you trying to say with your work? Has it changed over the years? Do you ever engage in, like, here's another, that's part one, but the other thing is, do you ever see your work as being, part of, like, say, a political discourse or a reaction to your, moments in your history and your relationship with society, or what, or, do you ever think of it that way?
I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, pretty fair-skinned kid, pretty tall, liked to draw, and read a lot. So I got teased a lot about who I was and what I was doing. And so I had to learn how to live with that. My idea of getting along was just simply, I learned not to listen to people. I learned not to listen to people's opinions about me in particular, about who they thought I was. So this leads to the whole notion of me painting. I mean, I didn't want to paint Renaissance paintings, and I didn't want to paint figurative paintings, and I didn't want to paint still lives. What I thought I wanted to do is make paintings that I hadn't seen before, basically, or that had some resonance with the kinds of stuff I saw on my walks when I was a younger person in New York City, and when on my resurgence and my return from school, et cetera, in 78 and 79, walking around and looking at New York as it was then. So there was a resonance with what I looked at as a child, and resonances of what I looked at as a younger man. So all of those things were sort of collided with each other. You didn't grow up in Brooklyn, and you weren't fair skinned, and you still knew that you were Black anyway, because and I used to piss people off when I told them that I had darker people in my family than they were, and it was true. And I could show them my granduncles and my grandaunts and my grandmothers on my mother's side, straight out of Ghana, straight out of Nigeria. And there was no playing with that. I mean, and people would look at you like you were crazy, but so what do you want to do that for? I said, that's who I am. I wasn't trying to pass for anything but what I was as a person. Right. And trying to learn how to make those adjustments. And those adjustments are really hard. And I don't recommend it to anybody, but there you go.
Yeah.
So the process of doing this art where people are always telling you that you can't do it, or you won't achieve this and you won't achieve that. My answer to them is a BFA from RISD and a MFA from the University of Michigan School of Art, Horace Rackham Graduate School. That's my answer to them. as well as 5 years of university teaching and over 20 years of being an artist of record and a lot of adult education classes and facilities that I've taught at over the years. Worked with a lot of people just doing the same kinds of things that I do now, making watercolors and making these really quirky, what I consider quirky kinds of artwork. As far as, no, there's this whole resurgency of, I'm glad to see that there's a resurgency of Black portraiture and stuff like that, but that doesn't have anything to do with being a person of color or a descendant of Africans or a descendant of Africans in the United States to America. Because I mean, you basically know the deal as you grow up. You see exactly what's going on, and you know what the deal is. So, what you're trying to do is to stay out of trouble, stay out of the way of the law, stay out of getting involved with people who want to put your money in their pockets, and trying to go on from there. I mean, it's really rough because there are a lot of people that just see you not doing as well as you want to be doing. And that's a real problem. But then there's also this really false kind of portraiture and this sort of panoramic Polaroid kind of take on Black portraiture, which really, in a way, looks just too plastic. Okay, and I'm going to leave it at that because I know a lot of people are going to get mad about that, and that's okay. It's just different because none of us want to be outsider artists. None of us want to be other than who we are. People are striving to do this and do that. And for the Black, Hispanic, Native American, all people of color who are working it as artists, always seem to get poked and prodded into that area. When in reality, they're just trying to make paintings. I mean, think about Velasquez, and then think about his assistant. I can't remember his name offhand right now. But Velasquez's assistant was a mulatto in Spain. And he had his own style of work and so on and so forth, but I guess he also worked with Velasquez. So there's people like that. There are situations and circumstances that have made art making very difficult for people who wanted to do it. Juan de Pareja is his name. Okay, I remember.
Yeah.
Juan de Pareja, who is assistant to Velasquez during that period of time. But being Black is sort of like, to a lot of people, not being pure in terms of the Western hegemony and so on and so forth. And we could have like a roundtable discussion based on that, the policies of 12th and 13th century Rome, Italy, etc. So let's not get started with that, because as African, or as people who are descended from Africans, we have a much longer run historically than the Europeans have. And as a matter of fact, when the Europeans weren't washing themselves properly, we were teaching them how to bring water into their houses so that they could clean themselves and go to the bathroom and stuff like that.
Well, let me go back to what do you hope people take away from your work? What are you saying with your work?
Well, I don't think there's any one way to paint. I don't think there's any one way to be a human being on the planet. And you can look at people's work who have been sort of singled out as very, very, very good artists, and you can see that. I want to see painting. Well, my dream is to see paintings in the Whitney Museum, and to see my work in the Museum of Modern Art, or in the Met, or at one of those galleries that sort of like overlooked me during the 80s and 90s and the 2000s and the 2010s. So I'm hoping that that my work will bring a variance to people who are working outside of the sphere of just illustrative work, and I'll leave it at that. I don't want my work to be illustrative of the fact of anything. I want my work to have texture, color, line, volume, and sort of explicit kinds of marks and forms, and that's it. And I couldn't ask for anything more than that, because I don't want to paint portraits. There are things that I might paint in the future that might resemble portraits of people, but it's more of a spirited notion than it is to actually try to reproduce a face or reproduce a body. Because I know in my own work, I've got a lot of gestures which could be considered humanistic to a certain degree. And they may be taken from that, but they're also engaged with the painting that's on top of them. So.
Well, Lawrence Philp, I want to thank you so much for sharing your work with the Geneseo community and spending time with us. This interview will be available on the gallery's webpage at www.geneseo.edu/galleries, and it will be posted on YouTube. And Lawrence, you please feel free to use your video if you will to broaden your audience. And thank you very, very much for doing this interview with me.
This is great, Cynthia. Thank you very much for having me.